Hello, my name's Andrew Tidswell and I'm Director of Professional Development at Discovery Education. Welcome to this webinar exploring the creative use of technology in primary English classrooms. In this session, we're going to explore some practical ideas for how you can use digital technology to enhance creativity in the literacy classroom whilst we build the skills of children in literacy. But before we start, I just want to set the scene a little bit, talking first of all about this quote from Ken Robinson, stating that creativity is as important as literacy. So I think it's a great idea to be able to take creativity, place it inside literacy, and ensure that we're actually building those skills with the children whilst they're also developing their literacy skills. I also want to take a moment to consider the 4 C's of learning. These skills are really essential to the way that children develop their own independent learning skills and provide the basis of employability for their future. And so these areas cover collaboration, communication, creativity and critical thinking. And we're going to look for ways that we can develop those alongside building literacy skills, and the use of digital technology really helps to enhance that as well. And one of the key reasons behind this is because of what it provides for children in their future as they become learners and extend that into their working life. Because as the economy covered in a recent piece of research, problem solving is the most in-demand workplace skill, but it's closely followed by collaboration, communication, critical thinking and creativity. And so we want to build those skills in our children and create lots of opportunities in learning for them to develop just those skills. However, we're focusing here particularly on literacy, so let's take a look at some of the ways that we can support children as they build their literacy skills. We're going to think first of all about how we can use media to support literacy, and by using digital media get children to use those 4 C skills, to think critically about the information that they're receiving, to collaborate to build responses, to be creative in those responses and to communicate their ideas to different audiences using different mediums themselves. So we can include within that things like making use of images. So we can gather digital images to use for children to respond to in a variety of different ways and get them to be writing and creating communications about the images and how they respond to them. We can, of course, also use video, and there's a wealth of high-quality video material out there now, and we can use that in lots of different innovative ways to promote children's literacy, but also to get them to think creatively about the way that they're doing that. And then finally, in terms of media use, we can talk about using audio and having children respond simply to sound, whether that's music or commentaries or podcasts, etc. All of those things can build children's critical thinking as they develop their literacy skills as well. So let's have a look at a few sample strategies, some ways that you could use that digital media in the classroom, both to build students' understanding and to give them opportunities to develop their literacy skills. I'm going to start with a simple strategy that I call perspectives, which uses image to get children to think about the different perspectives that they could take on an image and to respond to that in a variety of different ways in a literacy activity. So it could be a speaking and listening task where children are working in small groups or pairs to take on different perspectives as they look at the image. Or it could be the basis of some short, quick written responses, or more developed, more thorough written responses as well. So I'm going to take you through a couple of examples to just think about how those images might work. This, of course, a really famous image taken on the moon from the first moon landings. And straight away, of course, the children can be thinking about the perspective of the astronaut that's looking at us. But it's such a famous image, isn't it, with the reflection of the photographer in the image as well. So straight away we've got those 2 different perspectives that children could talk about in their discussion group, or could be the basis of a quick written response. Similarly, we could take ourselves and continue in space here and look at the perspectives of the different people around the table here and get children to think about what's going on in their minds as they're in space here and the pizzas are floating around in zero gravity. Are some of the people in the image new into space? Is it an experience they've had before? Is it different to what they expected? Is it how they feel, how they expected to feel, and so on? So the responses of all the different people in the image can contribute to the way that the children are going to develop a piece of writing or a speaking and listening task. We can also use it potentially to develop empathy and take children to different settings. So here we're looking down on this scene where people are gathering water from a water pump. And again, there's lots of different people in there in that image who they could take on the perspective of. But don't forget, of course, that we're actually looking at that image, and the person creating the photograph may also have a perspective on the scene and a reason for what they're feeling and how they're thinking about the image. And then, of course, we can continue to do that with all kinds of images. What's happening in the minds of these people as they land on the air ambulance? What are they expecting to see? What experiences have they had previously? What's going on for these people in this horse and cart? Why are they dressed in this particular way? What are they looking forward to? And so on. So I think one of the key things to think about here is the fact that we can create lots and lots of different perspectives on single images and get children to zoom in on that and think about their own responses and get them to empathise with people in an image and talk about lots of different points of view from one single image, which of course can be a nice starting point for creating characterisation in a written activity and to develop perhaps some research work further into what is actually going on in an image and to ask that for that detail so that they can then respond to how the different people in the image actually are thinking, feeling, or what's going on for them. There are, of course, lots of other ways that we could use digital images in literacy sessions, and some of the ideas that we're going to cover as we go through this presentation could easily be used with images as well. But for now, we're going to move to some strategies that explore the use of video within a literacy classroom. So the first one we're going to look at is called AEIOU, which is actually just a simple acronym where A stands for adjective. So the children will gather a list of words that describe things that they saw or learnt about in the video. Secondly, we talk about E for emotion. So they describe how a particular part of the video made them feel, or it might be how somebody appearing in the video would feel, or somebody who's connected in another way. I stands for interesting. So what did they find particularly interesting in the video? What stood out for them? O is when they're surprised because it causes them to go, oh. So noting down anything that was different or unusual or surprised them in the video. And then finally, U stands for as in asking their question about something that they were puzzled about from the video. What do they want to learn more about, or what are they going to go and find out about? And that can form the basis of a very simple response, simply creating columns or tables where they put their responses for the 5 letters, just as a task in itself, and thinking about the language. It can be preparing them for a discussion or a presentation, but it could also be the basis of a more extended piece of writing where the children are then going to make use of the adjectives, those emotional responses. They're going to focus in on the things that are interesting in the video. They're going to talk about the things that did surprise them. And they're going to then be prompted to explore their own questions, find out the ideas and answers behind that, and use that in their extended writing. But it's a nice way of structuring different ways of thinking about information in a video before you go ahead and present it. So in this example here, we're looking at a video about volcanoes, which will contain lots of information that the children can gather these ideas across the 5 letters and develop that list before they then move on to a more extended piece of written work. Our next strategy is simply about creating storyboards. However, we're going to use different elements of a digital video to support us with that. We can provide the children with a simple template for their storyboard of 6 or 8 boxes, for example. But what we're going to do first of all is we're going to play the video without the images. We're simply going to focus in on the audio of the video. And as the children are listening to that audio, we want them to think about the details of what they expect to see when the video is presented back. So they're focusing in on the information and the ideas contained within the video, but they're adding to that by thinking about the visuals that they would include. So they can sketch that out on their storyboard, and they can add simple captions or keywords to that, or they might develop a simple sentence for each part of their storyboard. And this could be used as the basis of an oral retelling, preparation for a presentation, or for a more extended piece of written work. For example, each element of the storyboard could be the formation of a paragraph in their extended writing. So let's have a listen to
On
some
this
audio.
street was a busy bakery owned by a man called Thomas Fariner. He was the baker to King Charles II. He had a big oven for baking bread, and one night it's thought the fire in the oven wasn't put out properly, and a spark leapt out and set the bakery alight. Thomas and his family woke to the smell of smoke.
And so by listening into that video, the children are going to be creating images in their mind, which we can then follow up by making use of the actual video and the visuals. Potentially, like here, taking the sound away so they can really focus in on the images that are being seen and add some more descriptive vocabulary to their storyboards, or clarify their images and ideas, or to make use of the video with the full commentary. So the idea here is that by taking out different elements of the work that they're doing for preparation, they can focus in on key things such as the visuals, the vocabulary that they're going to use, the sequence of events, and use all of that to support them as they then produce their final piece. For our final simple strategy, we're going to make use of all of our senses and multiple aspects of digital video. We're calling this one sensory perception. And what we do here is we select a video and we play that back to the children multiple times in different ways. And each time we ask them to focus in on an individual sense. So first of all, we might play the video completely silently with just the images on the screen, so the children can note down what they can see in the video, what they think is there, what they think is happening, and gather ideas about the visuals. For the second pass, what we might do is we might think about just playing the video without the images and focusing in on the sound. What can they hear if they were in this place? What could they hear around them when they're watching it? And then we can combine that and put the audio and the video back on together, and we can get the children to think about things that they might be able to touch there, or what they might be able to smell in a certain setting, or what they might even be able to taste perhaps. So in this example, we're going to use a video that focuses in on images and sounds to create an atmosphere. And there's lots of ways of doing this, but let's have a look at this example. So we could think, for example, of blanking that video out and focusing in just on the sound. First of all, getting the atmosphere building up by the sound effects that are being used, the music that's being used, and get the children to respond to that using that sense. And then, of course, by taking the sound off, we can then really focus in on the details of what we're seeing on the video and get them to really think carefully about everything that they're seeing, and then combining the elements again to think about their senses even more widely. Once again, this could be simply as a standalone task to develop vocabulary and to develop emotional responses to ideas and to think about senses and the use of the kind of adjectives that that might generate. But of course, again, it could be the basis of building different types of written responses. It could be a piece of fiction we were developing. It could be in preparation for writing some poetry, where we're using our senses to really think about the language that we want to include before we develop the written piece. But let's move on now to think about how we can use digital tools within the literacy classroom and put those tools in the hands of the children so that they can create content themselves, or they can respond to content that we've created for them using digital resources. Before we do so, though, it's worth taking a moment to consider the SAMR model, which many of you will be familiar with, which is a great way of evaluating the impact of digital tools in what you're preparing for in terms of a learning experience. And so the SAMR model takes us through 4 stages, from substitution, where the tool that you're using is simply a direct replacement for something you've used previously. So instead of copying something up with pen and pencil, you're making use of a word processor, for example. With augmentation, though, we start to see some functional improvement. So that might be making use of spell checkers and formatting tools in word processing to improve the outcome a little bit and give a greater level of access. But though, once we move on to things like modification, though, we start to have a greater task redefinition or redesign in the way that we're working. So in modification, for example, we might have children working on the same document, collaboratively to build their own response. So they could be working on Google Slides, for example, holding each other to account and looking at each other's responses and redrafting for each other in a collaborative way, which is certainly something that was much more difficult to do without a digital tool. But at the top of the row, we see redefinition, which is where the technology actually allows us to do things that were previously inconceivable. So examples there could be children making use of video recording material and actually creating their own videos collaboratively, having maybe collaborated first of all by writing the script, researching the information, gathering the visuals that they want to make use of, and then completely redefining the way that they can work in the classroom. So it's not necessarily a way of thinking that all of our lessons should be working at the redefinition phase, but it's a way to help you consider the impact that the digital resource is having and what benefits it might contribute to the learning. So here are a few ideas for us to consider where we put the children as the content creators, where they make use of the digital tools themselves to build their own content and to respond creatively to lots of different settings. So the first one I want to talk about is a strategy called Paper Slide. And you can see in this simple still image here a student making a paper slide. And all we do is the children use pieces of paper to make simple, straightforward presentations with key vocabulary, key ideas, simple graphic images, felt tip on pen, something simple like that. They create those slides and then practice presenting them back to identify the keywords that they want to use, how they're going to make that presentation. And then they make a simple one-shot video where they hold a tablet or a mobile device above the slides and provide the commentary as they move one slide to the next. This often works particularly well in small groups where different children can take on different responsibilities, for example, holding the camera, moving the slides, but also taking different parts of the commentary as they develop those slides and develop that response. So let's have a look at a simple example of a paper slide as a response to a creative task.
Problem: burning wood for cooking pollutes the environment and uses up the Earth's resources. Solution: a solar oven. It's healthy, it's clean, it's kind to the environment, and it's free. How to build a solar oven. Make a prototype. How do I catch the heat? Which materials, which weather, and which angle? Test it. Prototype testing. Right angle, start temperature 21 degrees, end temperature 26. Obtuse angle, start temperature 21 degrees, end temperature 23. And acute angle, not tested due to the weather. Design and build. Did it work? Did it work? Yes, it did.
Another more sophisticated way of promoting creativity with children is to actually get them to become video editors themselves, is to actually think of themselves as media creators. So, for example, in Discovery Education's platform, the vast majority of videos that we have on our service are fully downloadable. So you can take those videos out of the service and then make use of them to help children to retell the story in different ways by adding their own voiceover or adding different pieces of music to create an atmosphere within something, or to connect it with other videos if they create their own news story, for example. We can do that in a variety of different ways. There are lots of great free video editing softwares out there, and one simple example using tablet devices is iMovie on an iPad, where students can have a simple timeline where they can cut and rearrange video and take audio in and out. They can add their own commentary on top. They can add music and effects to retell the story of a video in their own way. So let's have a look at a couple of examples of the sorts of things that might be really helpful in there. This example comes from a folktale, a story about the Kelpie in Scotland, and you can see there's some really nice images involved here, and so the children could actually write their own script and take some of the images from this, some of the sections from it, put their own characterization on, their own voices in, and retell the story in a much more dynamic and motivating way. And I'm sure you would recognise that lots of children would actually want to write the script for this if they were going to adapt this animation for themselves and they were becoming the actors and performers of the piece. And you can imagine that they would therefore have a really high quality end result, but would cause them to focus in detail on the language that they were going to use in that video and to think very carefully about the sequencing in the information that they're presenting in that. But that's just one simple example. They can also film themselves and then use some stock footage to illustrate the points that they want to make. So one great way of doing that is to create your own news broadcasts. But what's quite nice here is a little simple example that I'm going to share with you from one of our News Bites programs, where we've created a little fake news item to get children to think critically about how information is presented to them. But interestingly, it's based on the same story we've just seen in the previous video about the Kelpie.
There's to be a celebratory fish supper on the shores of Loch Ness this evening in honour of a local family who believe they've defeated the infamous Loch Ness Kelpie. Ewan, whose father Callum is believed to have been taken by the Kelpie just over 10 years ago, says he's over the moon that the beast is now banished to the depths of the loch forever. Ewan managed to outsmart the Kelpie by stealing its magic bridle and throwing it over the rowan tree. This meant the beast instantly lost its magic power and was drawn back into the lake. Local folklore experts say that without its bridle, the Kelpie is powerless. It will no longer be able to rise from the water in the form of a horse and terrorise local fishermen. Good news for everyone who fancies a bit of fish for their supper.
And you could certainly imagine that children would have great fun creating their own news stories, either about topics or themes that they're covering across the curriculum, or local school news, or simply responding for themselves to genuine global issues, for example, by combining their own self-filmed material that they've carefully scripted with stock footage taken from a service such as Discovery Education's Espresso service. Finally, I want to explore a really immersive way of working with the children and developing creativity in the literacy classroom, and that's making use of augmented reality. Augmented reality is a really powerful way of immersing children in an experience, and the more we immerse children, the more authentic their response will be, and the more powerful opportunity that gives them to create their own written responses and develop all kinds of ideas based on something that they've experienced for themselves and something that they've actually felt. So, what is augmented reality? Well, it's a way of immersing people in experiences using digital devices. So the example you can see here is a child is holding a tablet device out in front of them, and what they can see is an environment that they're going to be able to explore. In this example, they're going to move around their school hall to explore this environment that's being created within augmented reality. And it gives them a really deep, rich, immersive experience as they move around and explore. But what's particularly exciting in the use of augmented reality is the ability for children to create those scenarios for themselves, to create those environments, and then to make videos and responses about what they're seeing in there. At Discovery Education, we've recently released Sandbox AR, which is our own freely downloadable augmented reality app that can be used on iPads. Using this app, children can design and build environments that they can explore using the iPad to take them into immersive experiences. So they can develop these environments using all sorts of different materials within the app to develop backgrounds and buildings and places that they can visit. They can include animals and characters in there as well. And once they've created that environment, they can launch it at room size and explore that as they begin to take on further ideas about what's going on in that environment that they've created. But as we'll see, they can then also record videos of themselves exploring that environment and developing a whole narrative around it. Here you can see that particular environment being scaled up to room size, ready for exploration. As we take an environment up to full size, the children then hold the iPad in front of them and they can walk through this space. And you can imagine straight away how they will respond to that in lots of different ways in terms of their own experience of that space, being able to walk through it and explore it in their own ways. So it could be the starting point of creating a written report, a description, a piece of fiction, a poetic response. It could be part of the exploration of a wider topic in other subject areas. But the key thing is they're actually able to go into that environment. But what we'll also see in a moment is how we can also get the children to create and record videos as they explore the environment and develop their creativity even further. However, we've also got simple things such as being able to include animals and creatures in the space and getting the children to walk around and explore those. So here we've got a shark floating around inside a school hall, but once we turn round, we can also say we've added in a dinosaur, we've added a plesiosaur. So children could be making comparisons and contrasts between these two different creatures that they couldn't possibly see in reality in their own school, and certainly would have to go on quite an elaborate visit just to see the shark, but would never be able to see the plesiosaur. And so their responses to that can become much richer by having been immersed into that environment. But as I said, we can take that even further. So children can create and record their own videos as responses to what they've built in an environment. So this next example is actually of a child who's created a solar system using the app. They've then taken us on a tour of that solar system, providing their own commentary. So what we're seeing here is actually a child responding creatively by using the app. So they're actually building this tour of the solar system. So here's their rocket taking off by shaking the iPad. And as they launch into space, all they did was put their finger over the camera lens to create the darkness of space. And now she's flying through the solar system and giving us a guided tour to what she can see there and the various places that she's going to stop off at. So of course this could be the basis of a really deep written response to different experiences that the child could script as they then put this together, or can be done simply by improvising over what they're seeing there and developing their literacy skills that way. And then perhaps the video could be used as a follow-up to turn it into a piece of extended written work. But you can certainly see here that the ability to build that environment and explore things much more immersively by using the iPad is going to give a richer experience for the children and give them a more immersive experience of what they're trying to understand. Throughout this webinar, we've looked at a range of different ways that we can bring creativity into the literacy classroom and how we can use digital tools to enhance that, whether that's responding to digital media in different ways, using different techniques or strategies, and how those also can help children develop those 4 C skills we mentioned at the beginning. Or we can take it even further by getting children to be content creators themselves, making simple paper slide videos, or using videos that are already available and editing them, or adding to that by creating their own videos as well. And we've seen how augmented reality can take you into an immersive experience that can support all kinds of different ways of working with literacy. So I want to close really by going back to Ken Robinson and thinking about how as schools and as teachers we want to nurture creativity in our children, and literacy is a great way of doing that. So as he says here from his talk, all of us, including those of us who work in schools, which of course is crucial for us, must nurture creativity systematically. And therefore some of the ideas we've included in this webinar are good ways of providing opportunities for children to respond to learning in a creative way and enhance their understanding and development of literacy, whilst at the same time having the knock-on benefit that it promotes creativity and gets them to think in creative ways as they respond to the material that you share with them. I hope you found some of the ideas in this webinar useful and that they spark off further ideas for how you can enhance creativity in your literacy classroom, in particular with the use of digital tools. If you want to find out more about Discovery Education, you can scan the QR code you can see on screen or use the short code below it. There you'll find more details about the work that we do and the services we provide and how they can contribute to that creativity, from the rich media that we provide to the tools and services that are included in our platform. Thank you very much, and we look forward to speaking to you again in the future.